All right, everybody, welcome back to the Skillist podcast. I am Brad Salon from Root School in Vermont.
I am Matt Corradino in St. Croix, Caribbean Earth Skills, Mount Victory Camp. This is how we do. My Brad, it's looking mighty warm in your neck of the woods. on your neck in the woods. Why are you flicking off the gods right there?
I gave you the double bird, bro. No, because I know what it's like there, and I should have been there.
Those birds have flown south. They've flown south for the winter.
I know,
my friend. Here they are. Hi.
Yeah, my birds are in your woods.
What is that? What is that super stylish scarf made out of, man? Look at that thing.
It's made out of. It's made out of your mom.
This early visitor. You
Oh,
gotta
what's
move,
up?
kid. You gotta move, kid. What are we? Are we talking about them today? We already talked about.
No, that
these
was
guys.
last episode.
That was definitely last episode. Why don't you go get your bow and arrows and you could show it? Yeah.
This episode is about arrows.
Ooh, yeah, arrows. Should it be? What? Ooh, look, it's a kid puncher. Boom.
Right, yeah, I was going to say, we could throw some blunts at him.
Go get that padded arrow. I'll shoot you with the padded arrow.
Ow!
Talking about arrows today.
You got to give him something
man.
to talk about with his therapist later in life.
Who? Him? Yeah, you're darn right. And then when I was 4, he shot me with a blunt-tipped arrow. You know, it's funny, like, arrows are probably, like, one of my most stressful but also enjoyable skills that I work on. For whatever reason, I'm always like, oh, God, I gotta make some arrows. And I think it's because they have to be pretty perfect. I mean, not, like, absolutely perfectly straight perfect, but I mean perfect as in, like, they gotta be definitely the right spine weight. They got to be like, you know, just the right length. You got to get those fletches nice and tight. You know, you have to have a good weight on the arrowhead. And, oh man, that little joint right there where the arrowhead meets the wood and all that has to be so clean.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, you can't get by with an ugly. I mean, you can get by with a slightly ugly arrow, but man, they need to be so perfect. So I generally tend to like stress about them, and I'll make like 3 times as many arrowheads as I need, and then pick through them all for the perfectest one I can find. And then, you know, like, same with the arrow shafts.
Did you ever read the
usually
book?
I hold on to the arrow shafts.
There's this old book called The Witchery of Archery, and it's about this dude who grew up in the antebellum South, and they took all their guns away after the Civil War. And so he grew up bow hunting. And it's kind of whack because he's just like shooting tons of birds for no reason.
So those old school hunters would kill anything.
Yeah,
there's this book, this guy who wrote, this naturalist who wrote all these books on St. Croix, and he was like talking about the wanton destruction of all the animals of the island, and it's so horrible that all of these birds have been extirpated. And then literally 2 paragraphs later, he's like, it was the last such and such duck that I ever saw on St. Croix, so I went out and shot it. So and here it is on my wall.
But anyway, this dude, he ends up in the Everglades with a Seminole named Tommy. I'm sure he had a real name, but the name that was in the book was Tommy. And he goes on and on about, like, this guy would throw his bow, like, in the canoe. He'd throw his bow down, no problem. But his arrows, like, he would meticulously go over them every night for, like, an hour and a half by the fire and just sit there and, like, nitpick every little detail about his arrows. And that always stuck with me. And
crucial.
It became clear, like, you can kill an animal with an okay bow and a good arrow, but you can't kill an animal with a good bow and a crappy arrow. And
you know, I would even say I wouldn't even want to go with an okay arrow, honestly. Right. I want my arrows to be, like, really nice. I have plenty of arrows where I was like, that's a good arrow, and it, like, didn't penetrate. You know, it went exactly, like, this far in and stopped.
Right.
Or, like, yeah, I mean, just, you know, or I thought it flew really straight and then shot and missed and then maybe practice shot with it afterwards. And it's like, oh, damn, I see how it keeps curving left right there. You know, like, you got to really be, you need it to be freaking nice, like, perfect.
Yeah.
And, you know, somebody once asked me like, "Oh, what's your favorite skill to work on?" And I was like, I think I like collecting. Like whatever it is that I'm gonna make, I love the collection part. Whether that's like cutting down the tree to make the bow staves, or finding the rocks to make the arrowhead, or collecting the basket material. And it's definitely like an obsession of mine. At this point, it's just part of my of my brain patterning, where it's like if I'm in the woods and I'm wandering around, like those arrow shafts just like pop out to me.
Yeah.
Like walking along, you see a nice straight shaft that's like the perfect thickness. You're like, whoa, I want that right there. That was a perfect moment for a YouTube short? You like that?
So
I'm always on the lookout for the perfect shaft.
Yeah, you are always fondling your shafts.
It's true, but and a lot went into that. Like that first time, like, oh, those are perfect, going and cutting them and then bringing them home and being like, oh shit, they're not that straight, or oh damn, that was just like this much too short, or like, oh damn, that was way too thick, which usually not as much of a problem as way too thin. But yeah, over the first 2 years or 3 years, it took me a while to get to where I understood each arrow shaft, and that was really like dependent on the material too.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And I used to go out and measure them, like literally measure them. It's 12 millimeters or what however many millimeters, and the time of year, the length, the ratio of the what the taper was, and then I'd measure them again at the 6-month mark, and usually I'd sit them for 6 months. And then, I spent so much time straightening them, like, go through, and every day I have them sitting somewhere, like right next to my bed is where it's at right now. It used to be on a dresser. Before that it was on a desk, and just every day picking up those arrow shafts and straightening them. And one of my favorite times in the whole arrow making process is that like magic day, like 2.5, 3 weeks after you cut that arrow shaft, where you go to straighten it and it stays.
Yeah.
And you got to feel it in the wood, right? It's not even just like that you straighten it and the next time you look at it, it's like as you're bending it, you're like, oh, this feels different. Like this is not the same piece of wood. And then, once every week or 2 weeks, picking them up and straightening them. And then when I heat them, because I always spend some time fire hardening them. It's like the most frustrating thing.
Okay,
like
fire hardening is total bullshit.
What do you mean?
What does fire hardening do?
I mean, my understanding is that that's what the old guys said to do. I just do it, damn it.
No, it's a good...
All them old timers said fire harden it.
I know.
And supposedly it makes it harder.
I think it dries it. I think it makes it harder, but I think it's a misnomer, and it always makes me crazy when people are like, you got to fire harden it, and I'm like, what is happening to the wood cells?
You don't think anything is happening to the wood cells?
I think it's drying it.
I guess maybe that could be
drier
the case.
wood is more brittle and harder, and I think it's useful to like force the last moisture out of something at some point.
We need some super dork out there to like start looking under a microscope, because I am damn sure not going to be looking under a microscope to go with this. I'm going all intuitive. And all the old timers said, fire harden that thing.
Right, it's ultimately semantics. It does make a difference to heat them.
It does, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good point. Is it just drying them? I don't know. Then don't fire harden it and let it sit for like 6 or 7 years.
What do you like for shaft material down there? When you're hunting for that perfect shaft, what are you looking for?
I like to... I'm not diving down that rabbit hole, except I could totally dive down that rabbit hole. I tend to... Oh, do I have it sitting in front of me? I do not have it sitting in front of me, do I? So this one right here is actually... You see it in people's gardens in the... I don't know how far north I've seen it, but this is lantana, which is a common... garden plant. Butterflies really like it. I know in the South, in Virginia and whatnot, you'll see lantana in people's gardens. And it grows wild here, and it has a hollow, pithy center. So it's nice and light, and that helps that FOC, the forward of center, so it has more weight forward because it's so light, and the arrowhead is, you know, way heavier, so it's putting more of the weight forward, so I like it for that. And I, you know, is it stronger because it's hollow? You know, I don't think that necessarily applies to wood products.
Do you do much with the bamboo?
Like, I do mess with the bamboo. This right here is a bamboo shaft. The thing I don't like about the bamboo is that the bamboo that I have here on the property tends to have really swollen nodes. So these nodes in here tend to be pretty swollen. Now this is an exception to the rule, and again, that eye for a nice shaft that I have usually picks out the shafts that don't have those swollen nodes. Yeah, I love the bamboo, but yeah, when these nodes are really swollen and big, when you first draw back, that first or second one that it hits can throw the arrow off a little bit. Like this is, I mean, you can see them even when I'm holding it farther from the camera. You can still see that they're kind of swollen, but this is not an issue. It's just a lot of times they'll be like really swollen. And you know, I didn't bring it down here to show, but I have maybe I'll grab it in a little bit, but I have one that, so at the very base of the bamboo, where I stick with branches. It's very, in the very center of a really thick bamboo clump, even if the bamboo tends to get really large, if it's a really thick clump, you'll get these shoots that only ever get this thick around because it just don't have the space to get that big. And those ones have less swollen nodes, right? They always do. So if I see that, it's like, you know, growing out of the clump in the center and it's that thin, if it has the right texture that tells me it's old enough, I just gravitate towards those ones because those ones are barely swollen at all. But otherwise it's branches, which have much more swollen nodes. Anyway, where the branches come off, at the very base of the branch, it gets much thicker. And I have a blunt-tipped arrow I'm working on where I just left that bump out at the end. And it's pretty perfect for that. So I do like the bamboo. The one thing I don't like about the bamboo is that when I go to if it's over-spined, if it's too stiff, it doesn't bend enough, then when you scrape it down, this particular type of bamboo does not like it when you cut through the wood grains on those nodes. There's I mean, the one that's most common is the Tonkin bamboo, which I don't have any of, and that stuff is so tough, it doesn't really matter if you cut through the wood grains at the nodes. So when they're manufacturing those, they're just stripping them down so that they're perfectly even and smooth. But I don't have that option because I would degrade the wood quality by cutting through these. But I do like the bamboo. It's just it's rare to find that perfect thickness of shaft, which usually when I'm collecting, I collect it like I want it to be half again as long as I need it to be. So I'm usually collecting them around 32 to 34 inches long is my finished arrow, you know, like not completely finished. I'm usually shooting a 30 to 31 inch arrow, which is kind of long. But I usually think of them, like when I'm gathering them, I want like 45 inches of arrow shaft length, especially for the bamboo because, you know, the shrinkage is real. And I want to be sure that I've left myself enough where if it's a little too overspined, I can use the thin end. If it's underspined, I can use the thicker end.
Yeah. I find with bamboo,
like
too, you have to get it
limited.
insanely hot to
dry it?
To straighten it.
Oh, yeah, it's got to get super hot. There's no straightening it green. It's one of the things that I love about, you know, when I'm in the Pine Barrens in the summer, I'm just like always on the lookout for those bamboo shafts, blueberry shafts, because those are my all-time favorites. You know, one of the woods that I use for bow wood here, the Eugenia Monticola, that'll have the most perfectly straight shaft, except there's always some radical bend in there somewhere. So I usually just put that right towards the front of the arrow, like right behind the arrowhead. But there's a bunch of stuff. I've been messing around more with vines, but their vines are really hard to get the right spine. And yeah, the other one that I've really been liking is the black palm. This is a fishing arrow. Yeah, this is a fishing arrow, and I have limited amount of the black palm because it takes so long to grow, and my patch, I need like another 5 years before I can harvest from that patch. So I got about like 5 or 6 more arrows out of it. And this one is like, it's a little overspined. It should be a little bit bendier. But I'm not shooting at a very far distance. It hasn't really been an issue. And because I'm shooting it straight down, usually, because I'm fishing with it, it usually hasn't been as much of an ordeal. I'm not shooting at far distances, and I've just kind of gotten used to the way it flies.
Right, I bet that thing punches into the water really well.
Oh my God, so well. And that's part of the reason why I use it. It's so heavy.
Right.
I first came in contact with it in Costa Rica. We stayed for like a week at this village called Yorquin on the Bribri Reservation. Back then you had to take a boat to get there. Well, it's been like 20 years almost, so I'm guessing they probably have a road now. Anyway, we did some bow and arrow making, and this is what they use for the foreshaft of their arrow. And then I don't have it with me sitting here, but on the back end of this foreshaft, they get like a 3.5 foot long piece of this type of cane that grows there. That's like it's very soft. You know, it's like a spongy grass that just can hold up enough, and they wrap the shit out of it in the knock, and they put a little piece of the black palm at the back where the knock is, and then wrap it really hard, and that's the knock. And then they don't use any fletching. And I was picturing it, you know, like shooting downwards, but they shoot the sight straight. Our bows, I mean, mine's sitting inside the house. Our bows are in like the 40 to 45 pound range, and they're really short, because I guess the guy, we're trying to tell him that we're bow makers, but he didn't want to take as much time, so he gave us smaller pieces of wood to use. But yeah, he's shooting those things like, you know, like 20 yards, and he's shooting the fish when they jump out of the water. He's not like shooting into the water. He's just like shooting them when they jump. And I was like, oh, how often do you hit the fish? And he's like, I never hit them unless they're spawning and there's just a bunch of them, and you're just kind of shooting into the crowd.
Yeah.
And I made it. I love it. I never use it because I'm like, I love that thing. I don't want to destroy it. And the piece of cane is in the house.
Yeah.
But yeah, I as soon as I saw that I had one of these black palm trees at my house, I was like, boom, I want to grow my patch of that. So I have a pretty large patch of it, and it's amazing. It's amazing stuff. It's great for bow making. It's great for arrow making, and it's super pretty, like black and white striped wood. Really, really gorgeous wood. What's your preference in the frozen north?
Oh, I thought you were just going to talk this whole episode.
Oh, fine. I will. See if I care. Okay. You're so constricted in the throat with that silly looking scarf you got on.
So we have arrowwood, which is a viburnum, and it's awesome, obviously, for arrow making. But the nannyberry is good. The high bush cranberry is good. I don't really like the red osier dogwood. I find it loses its straight. It's like it gets any moisture and it goes crooked again, no matter how much
Why don't you fire harden
it? Or put lightning grooves in it. Yeah, so then I really like sucker shoots from maple and ash, and I also really have been digging splitting out stuff like hickory, and especially for blunts. Like I have a couple hickory blunts that I've made from all one piece that were split outs that they shoot so well and they hit so hard. But yeah,
they're so heavy.
Yeah, I really dig especially for blunt material, the hardwood shafts. And then a lot of it, what I'm using is that I just go for that arrowwood. And it's funny, like a lot of the places, we see it planted ornamentally a bunch. And we actually found a flower farm that grows like rows of it, and they need to thin it every couple years. So every couple years we go and get like 100 arrow shafts there. And then college campuses.
You said that's roses.
No, viburnum.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Arrowwood, yeah. I haven't had much luck with the rose. I think because my draw is so long that like I don't tend to find them with the right pith. I can get them crazy straight, but getting the spine high enough for my length and weight of bow is just, I don't really get there with the multiflora rose.
I guess it depends maybe where you live. I wonder if is it like, see, I would have assumed that it would have been better where you're at, but maybe not. Maybe they get to that growing season and they just like shoot out really quickly.
Right.
Or something like that. I mean, I used to collect them when I was in Western Jersey. I collect them and used them a lot. But yeah, I guess I haven't really messed with them from anywhere but there.
Right. There's not a ton of it up here either.
You mentioned those lightning grooves. The hell are those things for? What the hell are they supposed to be doing?
I mean, I've heard that they're supposed to like add surface area so that the arrow shaft can then like maintain straight better. But I don't know.
Understand how that's supposed to help. I don't get it.
Right.
I mean, it's fine if it's a cultural thing, like you just want your arrows to look really badass. I think that's super cool.
Right.
I think that's completely valid. But I don't understand what the physics are supposed to be behind those grooves. Like, how would that help it? It's just because you're disturbing the grain and causing it to forget how it originally was wanting to bend. I mean, I don't understand what is it.
Yeah. So lightning grooves, for people who don't know, is like scoring down the length of the shaft and putting like a score line into the shaft. And I think, you know, it would add surface area in that like the surface is now going up and down, so it's going to be more distance, and then that can add more rigidity.
It lets it get harder when you fire harden it.
Right.
Got well, more then surface
the other
area
idea, I wonder if it has like a turbulence effect, the way that like a golf ball has the divots in it, and it makes it fly better. And that's why like some of the non-returning boomerangs from Australia had those score marks down the whole surface. But I don't know. I think it's starting to get to a splitting hairs thing, and I think you're right. There's like a cultural inheritance aspect to it in which it might not need to have like a specific reason, or it worked really well with a specific shaft material that because we're not using that shaft material in that environment that we don't see the reasoning for it. But
there's probably some like pseudoscientific primitive skills nerd out there who did 100 arrow shafts, 50 of them with the score marks and 50 not.
Yeah, that'd be cool. It'd be a cool
what the
study.
Results would be. I never really thought about that turbulence effect thing you're talking about, where, you know, the dimples in the golf ball, but I could see how that would make a difference. I mean, it's like you're talking about like splitting hairs, but I mean, that's literally what you're trying to do with your arrow if you're hunting with it, is split some hairs.
Right.
But, you know, like over a short distance, 5-10 yards, it's not going to make any difference. But over 20 yards, that little amount of your arrow jumping to the left becomes like a big miss. So I can see why you would want to, split some hairs there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me wonder if the bamboo, if it helps to have those little bumps on it, because that would be about the same effect for it. Have you used your blunt-tipped arrows hunting wise to any success?
Yeah, I have. I've killed some gray and red squirrels with them, and one grouse and a snowshoe hare.
Now, have you shot any of those same animals with a broadhead?
No.
I wonder about that, because I was always told that it just mince it up, and I'm like willing to believe that it would just mince it up. But I shot an iguana with this, and I had to run up and smash its head with a rock or a stick to finish it off quicker. And I also shot one with a broadhead, because that's just what I happen to have in my hand. And I also had to run up and smash its head to kill it quicker.
Right.
And I could discern almost absolutely no difference whatsoever. I mean, I guess maybe if this was something smaller, like a squirrel, just like less meat, so I wouldn't want to like.
I just think about it in terms of like, it's just a different approach. With a broadhead, I'm looking to cause hemorrhaging, and with a blunt, I'm looking to destroy structure. Like either ideally the skull structure, but if I get the spine or the shoulder girdle or the pelvic girdle, then like I'm stopping that animal from getting away from me. And I always carry a finishing stick. If I carry any blunts, then I'm carrying a walloping stick, because my experience with them is like a small handful of animals I've shot with blunt, I've actually hit in the head and killed, like had it do the leg dance and die without another strike. Everything else, it's like I cripple it and I run up and kill it real quick.
Yeah, that tends to be the way that it goes.
I mean, especially red squirrels, like they see the arrow coming and move. Like,
oh man, even gray squirrels.
yeah, they're living in the
Like, I've
Matrix.
seen them.
So
It's so crazy when you see a couple friends of mine and I were taking videos and shooting at these squirrels in our friend's backyard, and it was like a small amount, I don't know, like let's say like a 3-foot square area of ground was showing how much we were zooming in, and the arrow was actually entering the frame just before the squirrel started to jump.
right.
And that squirrel dodged the arrow all 4 times that we shot at it. And I was just like, all right, forget it.
Right.
And of the 4 or 5 animals, I killed a couple of iguanas and I killed 3 squirrels with these. And no, none of them were very quick. I've had to finish them all off, and I never got a headshot with this. Shoulders, spine, back of the neck, hit the hips once, which is not what you want, but it doesn't get away,
Right.
And that's kind of, really, even if you're shooting with a broadhead, I mean, on a squirrel, the vitals are like that big, It's like a tiny little area you're trying to hit. So
Oh yeah, their head is as big as their vitals at that point.
Bigger,
Yeah.
really.
Right. So I mean, yeah, it's like it's an easier death than a bobcat's gonna give it, but
Yeah, still not quick.
no, I mean obviously the preference would be as fast as possible, but that would be a firearm at that point, and just shooting it in the head with a 22.
I've never killed a turkey before, but I have killed peacocks. And I shot this peacock, and the arrow did not penetrate. I hit it in the wing, like right where I was aiming. It was right at the vitals, but I didn't realize, because I was never taught this, the reason why you don't shoot them like that. Some teachers just don't like that to tell you. Anyway, it didn't penetrate, and then somebody else was like, oh, well, you can't hit them in the wing because, it's like a friggin' armor. And then I was looking up primitive arrows for turkey hunting, and this guy had this video of, he had found an oak shaft that went and like it rooted, like the way the roots were was like on top of another root, and so it made this like 5-pointed kind of star shape at the bottom of the arrow shaft, and it was like the perfect size, and he made an arrow out of it, because with those points sticking off, it was like a larger area. And he was aiming for the head and neck of these turkeys. So I took the piece of bamboo and I made this. I think I showed this during a different different podcast. But it's split bamboo with little pieces of wood shoved in there to spread the bamboo. And it's basically just to make this larger surface area. And I originally had a piece of black palm sticking out the middle just to make it more menacing, but it was so heavy that it just like dropped when I shot it. And I went with just this arrowhead right here, and I shot it at a peacock, and it just like barely grazed and didn't really do anything. I think I probably just caught the feathers. And I was all excited about using it again. And then these peacocks came into the garden again, and I didn't have this sitting around. Like, the closest thing nearby me was a broadhead, and I went out, and it was facing away from me, and it was like a bad shot. I was about 4 inches too high, just as it ducked its head down a little bit, and I shot, and it heard the arrow, it heard the bow, the arrow leaving the bow, and it stuck its head up, and I cut its neck like 3/4 of the way through its neck. So, it was a pretty perfect shot, but I haven't had the chance to use this again on those peacocks because they don't come into the garden anymore.
I wonder why that is.
They actually learned they don't come in the garden anymore at all.
Yeah.
Because they'll tear that garden up.
Yeah, that's a win.
But yeah, I'm excited to use this again next time I get the chance on those peacocks. But they don't come in the yard anymore. So yeah, these are, I guess this could work with any small game, really, because it's not going anywhere when you hit it with this spiky thing. Man, I made the sweetest one of these blunt-tipped arrows. I made it with this friend of ours, Andrew Pinger, and like as soon as we were done, he was like, let's go stump shoot. And I went out, and he picked this leaf of a greenbrier that was in the thicket of vines, and I remember looking at it and being like, dude, we're gonna lose our arrows. He's like, whatever, you're afraid to shoot. I shot and nailed the leaf and never found the arrow. It was like,
Dude, I was going to bring him up. He made a blunt that I still have yet to see the match of, which was a fist. Do you remember that?
That thing was so cool
The
looking.
end of the blunt was just a fist. It was so awesome.
Was that a 4-shaft or was that the actual? I think it was the actual shaft. Thing was cool looking.
Yeah.
I think it was super cool.
It was hilarious.
Looking.
He's a hilarious dude.
Totally hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah.
So, what do you, how much of a stickler are you for the spine weight of the arrow? What are you trying to get? But within 3 to 5 pounds of that measurement, 50 pounds spine.
Yeah, I mean,
50-pound arrow.
I'll use the spine tester to get it close, and then I'm testing by shooting until it flies right. And I used to be more like afraid to shoot my broadheads because they take so long to make, and then I realize like if I'm gonna hunt these things, I need to know for sure that they're gonna fly well. And so those stacked foam targets, they call them like the block or the black hole, those things really don't do much damage to the primitive arrows. At most,
you're crazy for using those things. I ain't shooting my freaking broadhead into that. Are you kidding me?
What are you shooting into?
Oh, an old foam mattress, like a couch cushion with the outside removed. 2 of those.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And it's such a pleasing thing to see the arrow just pass right through it every time. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I'm gonna do to those goats.
Right.
Oh, get them.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll do is I'll like do that, and then right before I go to hunt it, I'll run like a micro pass off the edge of my point with like a horseshoe nail flaker that I have that's super sharp.
How the hell do you get it out of that block?
I mean, I have one that's pretty shot out.
Okay.
And so it's kind of perfect. And a lot of times it'll be like just gently poking out the back end, and I'll like just pull it right through. I've started gluing my sinew. Destroy your
fletching?
No, it doesn't. It's pretty durable. I've started gluing.
You're using hide glue?
Yeah, I hide glue my fletching now, or like my sinew after it's done.
It was always taught, you don't need that hide glue.
Yeah.
The sinew's got enough.
Yeah.
Don't even use it. Then I was like started using it. I was like, that was dumb.
Yeah. Hide glue on the fletching is the shit, or on the sinew rather.
Why not, you know?
Yeah, you can rub it right into it so that it's not adding any weight or anything. It's just like as you bang around your arrows in and out of your quiver or hunting them day after day, like if you don't glue them somehow, it starts to pick up.
I was told it was cheating, or like, you don't need it if you do it right. I'm like, that's stupid. Like, I can do it right and use it. Like, there's no reason not to use it. Like, that's what's in the sinew in the first place is hide glue. Like, that's what's sticking it. That's what's sticking it in there. Before I bought a spine tester, I had made a batch of primitive arrows, and I was like, damn, how would you do this? You know, how would you spine test them correctly? Primitively. And I obviously already had some experience, so I had a rough idea of how it should feel when I go to bend it by hand. So I collected these shafts and I got them close and bent them, and I had 6 of them or 7 of them, and I shot them, and there was one that was better than all the rest. And then I took it and I put 2 pegs on a piece of wood and hung it there, and then put a weight in the middle and then marked where the arrow dipped to. And I know there's like a formula for that. If you put a certain amount of weight, it's supposed to bend exactly this much to be a 45 to 50 pound arrow. I didn't bother with that. I just marked on the piece of wood where the arrow in the middle bent to, and then I just used that same same weight and hung it on the other arrows and scraped them down until they bent to the same degree. What do you notice happens if this arrow's over or under spined?
Yeah, man. So like over spined, it shoots like a 2x4. Where it kicks off. I'm righty, so I'm holding the bow in my left hand. The arrow tail kicks off to the left, and then it flies with that same angle and hits canted to my left, the shooter's left. And then with underspined, it fishtails. Like it fishtails through the air. And then porpoising, if I see porpoising, that just means it's not on the bow right.
Yeah, on the wrong knocking point.
Yeah, exactly. It's just too high or too low. But yeah, that's my go-to. And so I try and aim for them being spined a little tiny bit heavy, and then I test shoot them and scrape them until it's flying straight, until like it comes out of the archer's paradox and flies straight, and I'm hitting what I want every time, and then that arrow's done.
I think about that like E equals MC squared, although it should be like E equals M squared C, because it seems to be more about the weight than the acceleration. And it's like, they hit harder, right? It's like that equation is really true. If it's heavier, it's going to have more punching power. Like, that's why atlatls are so effective at actually punching through, because they're so damn heavy. But when you have a heavy arrow and you shoot it, it is so much slower than those light arrows, and it's just such a hard thing to get over when you see them fly so much slower. You're just like, there's no way that's better, right? There's just no way, because it's so slow.
Well, and you get so much more drop.
You get a lot of drop, and they're slow.
And as much as I can shoot like high weight, standing like on a sunny field in September, after 3-4 hours on stand, like
are you gonna remember that drop?
Yeah, well, and I'm talking about like heavyweight bows where you could shoot heavier arrows and not get as much drop. Like after a few hours on stand with my muscles not moving at all, like my accuracy with super heavyweight bows definitely goes down. And so
I try to draw my bow every like half hour to 40 minutes.
Right.
Just look around, make sure there's nothing looking, and draw. And if I feel I'm like, okay, it's been a while, so I should just draw this bow.
Right, but that's different than being like warmed up.
Times. Oh, totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Especially being old.
Well, I don't know. Honestly, when I practice shooting, I find that my first shots tend to be better than my later shots. I think it's just for me mental. Like, I'm not sitting there judging myself for, oh man, you missed the high, or you keep missing left, or, oh man, your grouping isn't tight enough. But like, those first couple shots tend to be some of my better shots. So that's just what I keep telling myself every time I'm out hunting. It's like, those first ones are better.
Right. Yeah, I get that too. It's nice when you're demoing and you just shoot like your first 5 arrows are all just like sick bullseyes. And
that's how you do it, folks.
All right, that's how you do it. See you later.
I'm done. I only like to shoot a few a day. That's pretty much just what I do. You guys go ahead and shoot. You guys keep shooting. You know what else is interesting is
looks like that every time.
Damn right it does. You don't like that. Don't look at that grouping. You know what does help me mentally is that I have the 3D course here, and so there's like 35 targets, and it's 40 shots, because some of them you shoot from different directions. I shoot so much better on that course. Like, if I picked 40 shots on my target here, my standard target, I don't think, I want to say that the shots on the 3D course those 40 shots on the 3D course tend to be better. Like the 1 shot per target, like I just shoot way better on them. And a friend of mine he's reading from, I think this is like, was it Saxton or Pope or Young? Which one was hanging out with? It was Pope and Young who were hanging out with Ishii. Anyway, he Ishii kept missing the target, like the field target. And then they would go out hunting, and he would just nail that thing every time. And he was asking him, like, how is it that you, like, hit the target? And he was like, I don't know what that is. Like, what is that thing that I'm shooting at? I don't know where to aim. What is that? Like, what am I shooting at right there?
Right.
I think that makes a pretty huge difference, having that 3D target. To me, it makes a huge mental difference. Like, my concentration gets better. I go from, like, telling myself, okay, keep it low, or like, all right, keep it to the right more. Just telling myself that thing for my aim, and I find on those 3D targets, I'm like, I just full confidence. Just like, hit it right there. Just hit it there.
Yeah. Here's one.
Way better.
Here's a question. Have you with straightening, so like straightening, the basic process is, like you said, you cut it while it's green, you're working it straight every day, which is the process of like taking your 2 thumbs, gripping it, in each hand, and then taking your 2 thumbs, supporting it, and putting a reverse bend into it in any way that it's bent, working from the tip to the tail and then back, sighting down it, and just like reverse bending out the bends. And then as it gets dry, or once it's dry, you're doing that with lots of oil and heat over a heat source, like coals of a fire, or even a candle if you're not outside.
I usually use very little oil. I don't usually oil them too heavily.
I oil them enough so they don't scorch.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm typically passing them through the flames very quickly. Like literally, like if this is the flame, I'm passing it through the flames like this quickly. You know, it's just like passing through really fast.
Right, because the trick is...
I just find I burn the shit out of myself with the oil.
Yeah.
That's why I stopped using so much. I'm just tired of burning myself.
Well, and so the process there is like the wood glue that's naturally in the tree is called lignins, and you're getting it viscous so that when you bend it, it's, able to bend, first of all, without breaking. And then second of all, it's holding, or, it's able to bend. And then once that cools, the lignins harden and it's holding the bend. And so
maybe that's the fire hardening. Maybe you're hardening that lignin.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like a weird little vitrification process going on there. But either way,
it solidifies the glues.
Right. Once you've done that process, have you ever fucking used an arrow wrench?
Never.
So like in the archaeological record, you see all those.
I see them.
Right. Do you think
you know what I
they're another
I haven't
use?
Used them. I haven't used them, but you know what I did just think when you were talking about it is maybe at the very tip.
Right.
Right, when I'm in the of a finished arrow, not like not a shaft that I'm working on, because I just cut them long and use the extra length. Yeah, exactly. As a handle to straighten them out. I've never used an arrow wrench. I've never found the need to use an arrow wrench, but you're right, they did exist. But I wonder if maybe that's for like your finished arrow shafts. Like you got to refletch it. Like this thing must get new fletches on it. So you take the fletch off, slide the arrow straightener down, and just at the very tip, maybe use that arrow wrench. I wonder if there wasn't some other use, and that was just like, oh, it's an arrow wrench, because people didn't know. What the hell they were looking at. Right.
Because I'll see them sometimes and they have pretty hard edges in terms of like...
Very hard edges.
And so it's going to dent your shaft.
Yeah, and also like, how, it would have to be like at least 3 inches long for you to actually get the torque on it. Right. If it's small and it's only pushing in one place, you're not going to get any torque by twisting that, no more torque than you would with your hand. If it's got to be 3 or 4 inches long before it would actually function as that. It's like, is there? There's got to be somewhere, anthropological, what do they call that when somebody's something in the historical record, some old native guy saying like, oh, that's an arrow straightener. Right. Or is there? I don't know. I don't think I've ever read in a book of somebody saying, oh, we use this to straighten our arrows. Not saying that it didn't happen, but like I've never used one, and I wonder.
I wonder if it was like a basketry tool.
Could be. Definitely could be. Like I said, the only way I could see it is to grip the end of the arrow. Yeah. And I guess you were talking about working from the point back towards the tail. I never really paid much attention to how I do that. I more do I usually go in a sequence from one end to the other.
Yeah, it doesn't matter which one. You just don't want to hop around.
I usually, I don't hop around a lot, but what I do is I do from one end to the other, and then I do the longer bends. Yeah. And I find myself doing this S-curve bend where I'm pushing, this hand is doing this. Right. And these hands are doing like the same thing, right? They're going at the same, opposite angles. Yeah. And I find myself doing that a lot. No, they're going the same angle, right? They're both going like this.
You get all the little kinky bends out as much as you can, and then you start sighting down the whole shaft and getting the longer bends out. That's true for me too.
I don't really stress about some of those little kinky bends. I just like to leave them, except for at the tail. Right. You can't have them in the fletches, because that just doesn't work at all.
Right. I just get what I can out of them.
And one thing that I definitely, it's like, so this one, I just grabbed the 3 feathers that I had that were prepped to do this fletching job that I recently did, and I don't like this. I like to always have at least one white or one white feather on there, at least. I used to make them nice and pretty with with like walnut dye or some other nice dark dye, and I no longer ever dye the last like 3 or 4 inches of that arrow because I want it as bright as humanly possible so that I can find it when I miss.
Right.
I just lost too many arrows because they're perfectly camouflaged when they go into the leaves, and it's just this, this last little bit right here sticking out, like, so freaking hard to find. Over it. Not doing that anymore at all.
Yeah. So here's some other nitpicks. Yeah, so like getting the shaft to the right spine weight, getting it, like you said, having it have a decent weight. With length, it's been such a battle over the years of getting it to be, like, I made them too short for a while, and then they would hit my finger on like or you get that, like, the sinew
shoot off the hand still?
No. I mean, this, like, the back of the arrowhead would hit my finger I'd be at full draw, or that sinew starts to, like, hit your arrow shelf. So you want it to be long enough to not deal with that, but then you don't want extra length on there because, that's going to fuck with your spine, and also it's just like my arrows are already stupidly long as it is. So yeah, getting it to the exact right length, and then like I basically just have an arrow that I'm like, okay, that's the one where I figured it out, and now I match everything to that. And then not leaving enough space for your fingers to not hit the fletching, but then not having your fletching so far forward that it's touching your bow at all, right? And I feel like when people start making arrows with students, they always make their fletching huge.
Yeah, like this is way longer than it needs to be.
Right, and you look at a store-bought arrow, and the fletching really isn't that big.
Tiny.
Yeah. So I've started kind of trying to match off of that and really like diminished my fletching over and over again until, it was hitting that point of like, okay, that's trimmed off too much, it's not working. But other than that, like, I want it as small as it can be. And that's another thing that's interesting when you look at the record and you look at, people who are shooting off a horseback where sound wasn't an issue, they have huge fletching. And then people who are hunting in the woods quietly have the smallest fletching they can.
Yeah. Well, you were mentioning the length of the arrows, and I started... so I used to just buy the arrows and then cut them, or at a cut length, or when I started making my own, I'd buy them and then cut them till they were like 3 to 4 inches longer than my draw length. And then I was needing to do some practicing, and I just didn't have the time to cut them down and reshape and make the arrows myself. So I bought them and forgot to tell them to taper them or to cut them, and I just tapered them and stuck shafts on them, and I noticed my shot improved with those longer arrows. And then what I started to do is, I made a couple of sets of arrows that were graduated sizes, right? So I had ones that were like, I don't know, a couple inches cut off a factory. So let's say that's 32. I guess they cut them usually at 34 or something like that. I can't remember what that factory number is. I cut off a couple inches of one, and I had like 32, 31, 30, and 29-inch arrows. And I shot them in a group, and I was like, they're all spined the same, but they're different lengths. And I was like, boom, 31s. Those are the ones that fly best. Right? And so that's just like an easy way to test it primitively if you don't have the spine tester for that length, because that makes a huge difference for me, even if the spine is correct, when they start to get shorter, you start seeing a lot of that where they jump to the left a little bit and then go in slightly sideways.
That's something that's always been funny to me, is like a shorter stick is harder to bend than a longer stick because of leverage. And so if you have a longer draw, at a certain point, or if you have a really short draw, at a certain point, the spine weight that they sell shafts at won't be correct.
At all.
Right. And so it's really about kind of like figuring out, with my length of arrow, how much, spine do I need with my draw length to create the right amount of spine. And that's why, like, I get them a little heavy, and then I reduce them. With store-boughts, I leave them as long as I get them, just because I also feel like it's crazy at $8 or $10 an arrow to not be able to like break the tip off and
and then
point them a few times.
Oh, totally.
And then, they end up being an arrow for someone else with a short draw.
For my kids.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I still advise people to get them the full length.
Yeah.
Because just because of that, you're pulling a little. Let's say you have a little, like a shorter bow, so you don't need to pull it back. Well, it's still, you still need that arrow to be the full length. You can't have this tiny little arrow and expect it to shoot straight, because it's going to be spined for like a freaking 200-pound war bow.
Right.
I only made practice arrows. I can't say that. I don't consistently make practice arrows. I do make them, but I just got tired of destroying them and putting all that time, and I figured, I could spend $12 on a decent one.
Right.
Rather than spending, however many hours gathering and straightening and then putting the points on them. But it's kind of like a disservice to myself, because I'm making my hunting arrows all from scratch. Like, that's just like what I do as a matter of course, which is super silly, but it's just what I do. But I still think that's like a good practice anyway, to have those store-bought, manufactured, measured, like everything is exact and everything is exactly the same, so that I have those to measure off of. The other thing is that, like, I'm willing to shoot 12 of those things into the target at one sitting, instead of, like, when I'm making my own, I'm shooting 3, and then I'm so afraid of, like, hitting the arrow with the next shot.
Dude, that's brave. I shoot
like
1.
6.
I shoot 1 and walk. I'm not putting 3 primitive arrows into a target.
No, 3 was it. 3 is it.
No, man,
that's
1.
That's totally it.
1 and walk.
But it's funny because my friend and I started playing this game with the store-bought arrows, and it's really, really freaking fun. Is you choose the jankiest arrow, and you shoot whoever has the jankiest arrow. You shoot that one first, because it's gonna, it's got the most variation. And then the game is to hit each other's nock, and it's like this weird competition cooperation. Because when somebody misses far off to the left and it's like right on the edge of the target, you're both like, oh, damn! Like, now we gotta really, don't miss, right? It's a super fun game, and it definitely improved our accuracy quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we only destroyed 1 nock, and we've, been so close to hitting that nock many times.
Yeah, we should have a whole
hard.
podcast about archery itself.
Well, how can you talk about arrows without talking about archery?
No, yeah, I'm just saying I'm thinking about all these different games and ways of approaching learning archery. But yeah, so some other nitpicks. Loose nocks.
Suck.
Yeah, they suck. So when you're cutting them in,
pinchy.
So like a couple things. When I'm cutting them in, the smallest chainsaw file, or
I start with 2 hacksaw blades taped together, facing opposite directions, as it goes a little bit faster. But I start with 2 hacksaw blades, and I cut it in super deep, and then I use the smallest chainsaw file at an angle, and then just barely get the back end of it, and then start testing it. And then I use one of those flat, like a mill bastard file, but just shrunk way down. And then I get in there with that to widen it out. Primitively, I've usually just done the trick where you make a hole, and then flip it over and make a hole, and then break it sideways.
Yeah.
And it breaks where you made the 2 holes. But then it just sucks because they fall off of the arrow all the time, or I got to pay attention to holding it on there. So I bite the bullet and cheat, or I would use a flake of stone.
Right,
a real
that's
thin
my
flake
go-to.
of stone, give it a serrated edge.
Yeah, exactly. A flake of stone, and then I nibble flake the edge to get like a micro saw, and then I have this piece of sandstone that's like, 5/16 of an inch thick. And I ground the edge to be like, have a radius, and I just get in there with it and use it like a little, The other thing I found is really useful if you're not going primitive, then you get that file in there, and then you bend a piece of like 100 grit sandpaper around a cabinet scraper. Yeah, and you can really clean and knock up nicely with that.
Or a belt sander. Sanding paper folded over and like crimped down really hard.
Totally.
So I have this fishing arrow that I showed, and the tip broke off in a fish. Unfortunately, I lost that fish where the barb is. I mean, and I've been shooting this thing with this cord on the back of it, and there was so much troubleshooting with this because first I had the cord tied too close to my fingers, and it caught on my fingers on a couple of shots, which really freaking hurts, right? Like whips through your fingers. And then I moved it forward, but then it was too far forward, and it didn't act as a fletching. And then I just it's finally settled in at this length, and it's far enough back that it works as a fletching, but close enough far enough from my fingers, far enough forward to not catch my fingers. And then I had problems with it, with the cord catching on my neck. Like I'd shoot it and it would drag across my neck and give me this wicked rope burn on my neck. That sucked. And that happened twice, and then it never happened again. And so I like set this thing up so that it's on a stick. I get a forked stick that's like bent, and I wedge it into the rocks where I'm fishing at, and it's sitting there, and the whole cord is all played out, and it's just on, like, there's one loop hanging down, and then it's just barely hanging on to the very frilly top of that forked stick. And I have to like hook it back up there a couple times while I'm shooting. And then I was like, what the hell am I bothering with that for? Like, when you hit a fish, it can't swim very far without this thing sticking out. And so I went and practiced with it in the same type of situation, and I hit it. Like, fuck, now I gotta jump in the water and swim after that fish. So I went back to having the cord, and I've landed 2 fish with this, and I have lost like 3 or 4 where I hit it too far back, and it just like, I don't know exactly what happened, but it seemed like on the one, like it just tore out of the bottom, like hit it right in the tail of the fish, and it just tore out. And the other one, one of the other ones was the barb broke. The fish was struggling with it, and the barb broke. But yeah, bow fishing is super fun. It's so freaking hard. You really got to get the fish to the surface.
Yeah.
But as far as the arrow goes, I think I'm overthinking it. I think I just could probably go with a lighter shaft, shoot them, and then jump in the water. Use basically like a regular arrow. Because I'm not shooting. I used to try to shoot further down in the water column, and the arrow won't penetrate. It just loses so much steam that it's kind of like, all right, there's no point to that.
So let's see. With nocks,
Well, I did.
If they are a little loose, have you ever heated them up and then pinched them shut?
I've stuck a piece of rawhide in them, like a little rawhide cup.
Yeah.
That
I have found success
so
if you don't burn the really super tiny thin edges. If you heat it up really slowly, way above the flame or above a coal.
And you're just using your fingers to pinch it with, or a couple of sticks or something.
Yeah, just pinch it shut. And that's pretty cool.
That's a good idea.
Because then you end up with ones that clip onto your string.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that. I try to make them so they clip onto the string anyway.
Right.
But
then they actually get narrower towards the end of the knock.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
I gotcha. So it actually can't slip off nearly as easy.
Right. Which is nice.
Another thing that took me a while to get just right is the foreshaft. I was making them where they were way too short at first. And then you go to draw back, and then that foreshaft passes by the arrow rest.
Yeah.
And then you go to shoot it, and the foreshaft goes flying, and the and the back shaft comes and shoots off to the side moronic like that.
That
so I found
rough.
Really to just make them either really short, where the foreshaft doesn't pass by, or long enough that the arrow is bending around the handle, like it's basically right in the middle or even towards the end. And then the other key, which comes in like huge for hunting, is like the problem with those short ones is the now it won't penetrate. Like getting the arrow to penetrate. If it's only like this long, it's only going to go that far into the animal before the rest of the arrow just stops.
What are you using?
So it's got to be long enough.
What kind of joint are you using between the foreshaft and the rest of the shaft?
Well, if it's a piece of bamboo, I'm just like reaming out the inside so it fits better. But otherwise, I wrap behind, split, and then carve out the 4 insides of the split, and then put the arrowhead or the foreshaft in, and then wrap the shit out of it. And it just kind of is pinching it. I don't mind if it comes out. It's going to come out. Like, there's no way you're getting that transition. I don't want to say no way, but it's very hard to get that transition to smoothly enter the body of an animal.
Right.
That penetration factor is enormous, which even on the arrowhead, it's like this one. So this one shot through most of the way. I know this one shot all the way through the goat. This one shot right through a goat. It actually passed through the edge of the rib and split it where it hit the rib, and then passed all the way through, and then she broke it off when she fell. So it's broken right here. So it passed through this much, but so often the arrow shaft stops like right where the wood starts, and it just so happens that the pitch is just right on this. I mean, I shot through it, and you can see here that the pitch is still very much intact in front of the wood there, and that's become my number one troubleshooting area, is making this transition from the stone to the wood as perfect as possible. Most of the time when it fails, it's right there. It goes exactly this far into the animal before it hits the wood, and then the wood just won't penetrate.
Yeah, it's weird, dude. Do you see people making arrows? I see it modern, but I also have seen it in museums, and I'm kind of wondering what the fuck the deal is there, where there's no pitch transition, and the transition between the wood and the arrowhead is shitty. I'm
thinking that it just wore away.
Right.
I'm thinking that that either wore away or somebody sold it or traded for it. Oh, can I get an arrow? And I'm sure that happened all the time. Hey, can I get an arrow? Like, oh shit, what do I do? Like, let me just stick it here, sell it to this stupid white guy. Doesn't know what the fuck he's looking at anyway.
Or it's like a war point where they're just manufacturing as many as they possibly can.
Yeah, and I mean in war, like I just needed to go that far if I dipped it in horse shit before shooting it at you.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'm thinking that the pitch just wore away, because when this breaks off, there's almost no remnant of it. Like you usually can't see any of it. It's like clean in that area. But yeah, I don't. Maybe it's possible, but that's like pretty unbelievable.
And when you're applying that pitch, so first of all, people always want to cut those halves way too shallow. You want that thing buried in there, at least a third, if not a little more than a third of the way up the arrowhead.
This is close to halfway up.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm pitching it in. I have pitch in the seat of the haft when I'm putting the arrowhead in, so that any gap in there is totally filled with pitch, and it's like squishing out the sides.
I put a ton of hide glue in there. I glue them in now.
Okay.
And it makes it much easier for the manufacturer.
Right, yeah, because once that pitch is in there, you have like a literal second to put your arrowhead in and get it straight before the pitch is cooled. But either way, I use pitch, and then I apply pitch kind of sloppily and make sure it's like coating the entire surface, and then I heat it and like very carefully with my finger, wait till it's cooled just enough, push my finger down and roll it, and like really work that pitch into that super smooth transition. I used to sand it, like I used to get it all in there and sand it, but now I find if I just keep carefully reheating it using like the edge of a candle flame, and then go from the flame, let it cool just a hair, roll my finger on it and repeat that process, pick away any extra pitch I don't need, that's kind of where I'm ending up.
I started heating the crap out of the arrowhead and getting the arrowhead hot enough that So first of all, it was drying the wood glue, the hide glue, so that it really stayed in position, which I also found to be a huge headache when I didn't do that. Is that as I'm applying the pitch and pressing on this thing, that I get the arrow a little bit out of straight, and then I got to heat it all up and start all over again. So I really like using the hide glue in there. So I hide glue it and then let it sit overnight, and then either the next morning or the next night get back to it. But I just had issues with this batch of pitch that I had made where it just didn't want to stay stuck to the arrowhead. And so I just started getting the arrowhead super hot. And so it takes a lot longer in the application. I get the pitch nice and hot, and I do the same thing you're talking about. I form this like turd of pitch and then just sloppily like bend it and sloppily lay it in place. And then I just start pressing it in. And the arrowhead is hot enough that I press it in, and then it like melts and kind of bubbles. When you heat the glue up or the pitch up, it kind of like expands up again. Anyway, I press it in, and it kind of like pops back out because of the heat of the arrowhead, and I press it back in again, and then it pops back out. And usually by the third time, the arrowhead is cool enough that it stays stuck in there. And I just find that that's really helped. And it's really made the pitch adhere much better to the arrowheads. I mean, I'm like working really hard at trying to get this pitch off of the corner of this arrowhead, and it's not going anywhere, honestly. There, I finally got it off.
We found spruce pitch is the most tacky. Like white pine is more brittle, and balsam fir is too wet. It's like it has too much water in it. If you cook it down forever, it's okay. But spruce pitch is really our go-to for arrows. And then we take a little bit of ground dried herbivore dung and grind it up and put it in, and then like a pinch of ground black ash, like or like charcoal ground.
Charcoal.
To a tiny powder.
Yeah, I mean, primitively, I'm just sticking to charcoal because I don't have the herbivore scat. But otherwise, I always char eggshells. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess primitively, you'd have to be collecting the eggs in the springtime to get that. But yeah, the not charred and not as flaky as I originally made it. Yeah, the person I learned from did it originally real flaky, and I found that it's faster, but it doesn't adhere nearly as well. So I really try to get it as powdered as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, primitively, it's just charcoal that I'm using, ground up super fine, and then the glues, the pitch glues here are kind of tough. Like they have to be like molten, too hot to touch, to really be fully liquid. They get gummy. And that's actually the reason why I started heating the arrowheads up as much as I do now, because the arrowhead had to be super freaking hot, because the instant that locust pitch hit it, or the instant that, Salon pitch hit it, it would just like gum up as soon as it cooled. Right. It would just be like gummy. So it doesn't get like liquid. I use, pitch pine pitch because I have access to that. Every summer I make another big fat pitch stick.
Right.
And then use that a lot. But yeah, otherwise, I started getting a lot of fresh pitch from the trees because it takes a lot longer to cure, right? I'm literally I'm getting it liquid, putting my hardener in there, and just putting it on while it's fresh, just straight up fresh out of the tree. And some of the pitches that I'm using, it gets really freaking hard, but reheating it is really a headache. Like reheating it without burning it is really a headache. So instead of fighting with it like that, I just started using it fresh. Just make a score mark in the trees that I go to, which is usually Gumbo Limbo, which is Bursera Semaruba, and the locust. Can't remember what the locust is. So locust and Gumbo Limbo are usually my two go-tos. I've used mango sap, which is pretty caustic, so I try not to use it too often. And Saman, what is that? I can't remember what that scientific name is. Anyway, yeah, those are the ones that I go to. But it's definitely trickier here.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that takes more time because it doesn't liquefy quickly when you heat it.
Right. Yeah, man. Those are all some good details.
Is that about it? I think we nerded out on that for a good while.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, we could get into the fletching, but really it's just be careful, make it nice and clean.
Talked about fletching yet. Yeah, I mean, I like that process.
The stiffer the feather, the better.
Oh man.
The less vein you can leave on, the better. I mean,
I don't know about that. I like to leave as much vein as I can get away with.
Really?
But that's still not very much.
Right. I mean,
I don't peel.
No, me neither.
Some
Peeling's
people peel.
bullshit.
No, because it gets all like curly and.
Yeah, unless you're making flu arrows.
Do you spiral through from the back to the front or from the front to the back?
From the front to the back.
Yeah, I know some people talk about the back to front's easier, and sure, it kind of lays in there a little easier, but it sucks. I hate doing it that way.
Yeah,
I do
always
front
go
to
from
back.
the front to the back.
Yeah, I just did this hunting class, and the students, everybody, well, I was telling them, 2 is like a minimum, but you really want 3 arrows in there, and that very first hunt, there was like a miss, another miss, another miss, another. We got back, and one of the students was like, I'm going to go and make 7 arrows right now. Like, a whole armada's worth of arrows.
Yeah.
And definitely the hardest part for people was the fletching, but they got pretty good at it.
Yeah. No, my first fletchings I had to rip apart like over and over and over again to make it not look like complete shit.
So hard. So I do one solid wrap. I go around until, usually just once or twice, until the first feather is held in place. And then I stick the other one down, hold it, go as few turns as I can before I add the third one, wrap it completely, and then evenly space them around the shaft.
Yep, that's what I do too.
And then wrap the bottom, or the forward 2/3, and then I go through with my spiral. And this is a single piece of sinew spiraling through, and you're not going to be able to see it, but the spirals are like maybe an inch apart. Which is great when you have long enough sinew to spiral through and have them be that close together. Otherwise, you got to do 2 or even... I never had to do 3. But yeah, I find the hardest part is getting the spiral. And this spiral was like so close to perfect. On my last fletch, you can see there's like a slight gap in this one. But all the rest of them left no gap in the feathers where I spiraled through. And I was so proud of it. And it was literally like the last... time I went through the feathers.
Somebody taught me a trick for making the feathers knit back together when they get ragged.
Yep.
Did you know that trick?
No. Wow, teach me, Brad.
You take a tea kettle that's steaming, and you steam them.
Huh.
And they'll knit back together.
You're saying there's still life left in this dogged fletch right here?
Yeah, man. Give it a shot.
This is what it looks like when you push it through the entrails of an animal you just shot. This is what the point looked like. Pretty freaking dogged, but it did its job. It broke, and it's so sharp where it broke.
Yeah.
And it worked, and it's passed all the way through.
Nice.
And I just forced it through, so it was easier than trying to pull this back out, and it dogged the fletching. But, dang. Well, I think we nerded out pretty hard on that one.
Yeah,
I think we lost most of the non-arrow makers with a quickness. We should have been making more offhand comments, but whatever. They stayed to hear me talking about fondling shafts, and then realized it was much more boring than they thought it was.
Yeah, well, hopefully there's folks out there making arrows. I feel like it's kind of a lost art. Like, there's a lot more bow makers than arrow makers.
Oh, yeah, and a friend of mine who hunts with primitive bows, and I was like, use primitive arrows, and he was like, it's already so hard when it's a wood bow, and I just wanted to keep putting meat on the table, and I was like, I get it. I totally get it. And in my experience, it's like it's way harder with primitive stone points. That's like, to me, it's like, the wood bow versus the store-bought bow. It's like you're only losing but a percentage of your chance of harvesting. But as soon as you get to those stone points, like, you just made it so exponentially harder.
Right.
Just because of that penetration factor.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting too, because like I think a lot of people come to arrows classes and they're pumped and they make an arrow and they're like, oh my god, that took me 2 days. Like, the idea of making 12 of them. That's why with like our long-term programs, we really try and push, like, you got to make at least 3 sharps and at least 6 blunts if you're going to hunt with them. And
Oh,
the
yeah.
people who do figure it out, and you're like, oh, you can work in batches and you get more efficient as you go. But yeah, I mean, it is. It's also a project that like should be spread out throughout the year, where it's like, okay, it's winter, it's time to collect shafts. I'm gonna collect, 20 shafts and be straightening them, like you said, like for the next month, and then I'm gonna work my way through a dozen of them until they're straight and ready to haft, and I'm gonna haft, 6 arrows, and then I'm gonna fletch, I'm gonna put blunts on 6 of them and sharps on 6, and then fletch 12 arrows all at once. And it's a lot easier if you
get
work
really
batches.
good when you do 12 at a time.
Right.
Man. And you get quick at it.
Right. So learn the process, and then batch work, I would say, is like a good pointer for students.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet dude.
So, dang, that was a pretty solid hour of arrow nerding out.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so I guess we've showed enough stuff that we don't need to do our usual "you don't like that" thing.
No, yeah, I think we've shown and told a lot.
Oh, I'll put it away till next time. So yeah, hopefully you made it through that one and still enjoyed it towards the end. I know there's some arrow making nerds out there who would enjoy it. So yeah, again, thank you for listening. If there's something you want us to banter on about, please let me know. If you're just super excited and tuned in to watch Brad with his neck warmer there, because he looks so stylish with that there scarf, then I'm glad you got your fill for the day of that fantastical neck warmer. And let us know what you want us to talk about. Keep tuning in, and yeah, like and subscribe.
Yeah, man.
Somewhere, the button somewhere. All right.
Peace out.
Peace out.